Well, the major party leaders have locked in behind the United States in relation to engagements in the Middle East, but the Australian Greens have not. And to discuss why, I suppose, I'm joined now by Scott Ludlam, Senator Scott Ludlam, Green for WA. Thanks very much for your company.
Hey, good evening.
What's the primary reason that the Greens are reticent to get on board with this?
It's principally that it appears a military-led solution to the last disastrous engagement in the Middle East that kind of flowed on from the one before that is not going to protect people. It's not going to bring stability, and we're very concerned, obviously, about its open-endedness, about the fact that Australia seems to, the Prime Minister appears to have rushed in and committed us without really being clear or upfront about what the scale of the commitment is going to be and what success would look like. We wanted the commitment to be put to Parliament. It could have been debated last week when everybody was there, to actually put all the cards on the table, and none of those things has been done. Even President Obama has acknowledged that there's no military solution. This is going to need to be resolved diplomatically by agents and partners on the ground. I
don't disagree that it potentially is going to be very drawn out, that there are limited capabilities that they'll be able to strike at ISIS unless boots are on the ground, so to speak. But I guess here's a question for you, Senator Ludlam. What would you say, I suppose, to the people that are in those parts of occupied Iraq and Syria by ISIS, who are facing such unbelievable human rights violations? Doing nothing, I mean, is doing nothing better than doing something, even if the something has failure in elements of it?
I'm not proposing that we do nothing. I don't think anybody is. And if you remember, again, Prime Minister Abbott led this debate going back a couple of weeks with the fact that this would be a humanitarian intervention. And in fact, that was the first thing that the Air Force were tasked to do. I guess I don't want to see it as an option between either doing nothing and sitting back while this terrorist insurgency just runs its course, because God knows where that's going to end up, or dropping high explosives on people and just kind of rushing straight in to open up a new front in the war. The key, it seems to me, and to other analysts here and in the United States, is bringing moderate Sunnis back online and into the fold in Iraq, because that's really the only support base that ISIS have. If you look at it, they are surrounded on all sides by people right from one end of the Islamic world to the other who loathe them and hold them in absolute contempt. What is driving their power base partly is cash coming out of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states that I thought Australia was meant to be allied with.
If I can follow up on that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just
You're
on
very
that.
quiet. I can barely hear you.
Hopefully we can turn it up for you. On exactly that, I mean, I spoke earlier in the show that I'm concerned that there hasn't been enough guaranteed involvement by other Middle East powers to be able to get involved. But that said, ultimately, what worries me the most, something that humanitarian drops can't do, this is why this is such a vexed issue for me personally, is that I've done the searches online, as I'm sure you've done, to look at the extent of what's going on in some of these cities like Raqqa, and it boggles the mind how barbaric it is. And I just worry that ultimately something, maybe it needs to be Middle East driven, but if it's not, then perhaps Western powers do have to join in. Something has to be done militarily to try to stop that, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can confront an entity like IS with anything other than that kind of force, because they're not going to simply fall back if you ask them nicely. But then it's a question of where are they getting their money? How are so many of them coming across the border into Syria and into Iraq in the first place? And where are the other countries? Sort of listen to Secretary Kerry's comments earlier about the alliance that they're stitching together from the region. It doesn't appear that anybody, or certainly not many of those countries, are actually committing any sort of force. And ultimately, again, Western intervention that again just tells people in the region that this is a situation that is going to be aggravated or made worse by bombs with US flags on them falling out of the sky, doesn't appear to me to hold any kind of lasting hope of resolution. It simply kicks the can down the road. If you're trying to split off ISIS from its very precarious support base of Sunnis in Iraq, who are utterly marginalised and persecuted under the al-Maliki government, then it seems to me that the last thing you would want to be doing is sending the US Air Force in to bomb people. So yes, it has to be led, I think, by countries in the region.
See, interestingly, you and I might ultimately, with a bit more looking into this, disagree on whether we should or shouldn't be involved. But one thing I suspect you agree with, I think that the major parties are papering over the realities that involvement carries higher terror threats at home. Now, you might decide that's a price worth paying, because of the atrocities being committed and therefore the engagement that's required by the international community. But do you agree with the premise that surely, if we are involved, even if it's only a slight increase, it does slightly increase the chances of this newly heightened terror alert domestically?
I think that's likely, and again, it's got to be handled fairly sensitively, but Australians have been transiting in and out of Syria, for example, for the last 3 or 4 years into horrific civil war there that's killed more than 200,000 people, and we didn't see the elevated terror threat occurring there. I struggle to believe that it's a coincidence that that terror threat gets raised in the very same week that we're actually, or within a fortnight of making these commitments about humanitarian assistance, that then very quickly slides into running weapons in, and then before you know it, we've got the SAS and F-18s on their way. The idea that that would be a coincidence, I think, is a bit hard to swallow.
All right, Senator Scott Ludlam, always appreciate your time on the program. Thanks very much.
Thank you.